everybody, to a raw evening for some Bills fans, a raw time to be alive. If you were a Bills fan, pounding the table, hoping that the Buffalo Bills were going to make a trade at the deadline. I'm your host, Buffalo Bills season ticket holder Drew Gear. That's my producer, Chris Kroger. And we're here just, Chris, you owe me a Seagram's. You know that, right?
No, for what?
Remember when I was like, no, Seagram's bet we're not making a trade? That's okay. You can pay it back to me some other time. I said they won't make a trade.
I'm saying I don't have a lot of room here.
We make a lot of these, don't we?
Yeah, and there's one right there, 23 and 24. So we're like 2 years behind. Laisel, 10 years from now, NFL Europe. Something here. I don't even write a season for this. Doug Roloski owes the Seagrams for A.J. Klein being on the roster. When was that? The 40s? Yeah, we have a lot to get to.
I know that you expected a trade. How do you feel today, having watched the deadline come and go, and so that the Bills didn't really produce anything?
I think Brandon Beane was talking to Darcy Regier. How do you do deadline deals? And Darcy Regier went, easy, you don't.
Easy. You just don't. If you don't, it'll never have to, you never have to worry about it if you just don't do the thing. It's a raw day for a lot of fans who had their hopes up. Now, I've been on record as saying that I don't think that our ownership is great. And some people just think it's sour grapes. Some people
you can compare the ownership to Golisano when he had the Sabres.
Kind of. And
except we have a higher budget.
Well, here's what I don't understand. All of the people who don't like Terry Pegula fall into a couple different categories. You have the people who think he's a grifter who stole money off fans for having a stadium built. You have the group of people who think like, hey, this guy's a rube, and when he speaks publicly, he makes himself sound dumb. And I don't love that my owner is a part of all this and is making us pay for PSLs while he has a super yacht. Okay, you can dislike all these things. My frustration with him, and I've gone on record as having said this before, is that there's no pressure inside this organization. A couple of weeks ago, we did a podcast after we lost to the Falcons where I talked about ladder theory. And I said, essentially, if everybody just keeps failing, I have to keep looking for who you're supposed to be reporting to and say, hey, don't you know the people who report to you stink? Or at least that stink is probably too strong in a sports context. But the people who report to you are not performing up to what the stated expectation is. I go back to the day Terry Pegula showed up to buy the Sabres to a whole lot of pomp and circumstance and said, from this moment forward, the franchise's sole purpose of existing is to chase Stanley Cups. How's that gone, Chris, as our resident hockey fan?
Still waiting on a playoff visit. Sabres have not been in the playoffs since I've lived here. I might have to move.
And this is all going on while you have a very hands-on ownership group of Kim and Terry Pegula. So for the years of that in the early goings, they took a team that was regularly competitive and relegated it to an afterthought in the NHL just through poor management. And then when they got the opportunity to make the choices at who would run the show and how to pull levers to get those people to do the things that was their stated mission, they failed. And they're still failing. Although the Sabres, they're getting points, which is less. I guess, Chris, would you say that finally the Sabres seem like they're trending in the right direction?
I mean, it's not often that I'm excited for losing 3 games in a row in overtime because, hey, we get at least a point, which is the dumbest thing in hockey, that you go to overtime, you get a point just to get to overtime. They need to implement a 3-2-1 point system, 3 points for a regulation win, 2 for an overtime win, 1 for a shootout win.
But they're a far cry away from where Terry Pegula said he wanted them to be.
Yes.
And yet what's he done about it to really change the direction of that?
Raise ticket prices.
Bang. So when you look at the Buffalo Bills, here's a team that hasn't been back to a Super Bowl in, 30 years?
Mm-hmm.
So
I think as long as the Blue Jays have not won a World Series.
Oh, too soon.
32 years.
When you look at a franchise that's run by a person like this and a group like this, and you say, okay, it's clear you don't, not that you don't care, but you have multiple priorities. One of them is success of your organizations, but what is success? Is success, hey, we won a Lombardi trophy, or is success, hey, we sell out tickets every year? Hey, we're making record revenue every single season. Success looks like a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But one thing I do know from both organizations is that there is no pressure coming from the top on either GM to really perform or do anything to save their jobs, quote unquote. And you will argue, and you'll receive the argument if you're critical of anything that this franchise does, that Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, even for all the detritus we might try to lay at their doorstep, that they do a good job. And you wouldn't be wrong. Chris, we could fire Brandon Beane tomorrow, and you know what we would get for it? Who's the next guy we hire who's going to be better?
You would get a long line of qualified candidates wanting to come to Buffalo.
Sure, and how would that go? The odds that someone would have the acumen to like, hey, we got here. Now we have to work a salary cap, and we have to spend draft picks and all these things. I don't think it would go well. I think that to move on from a guy like Brandon Beane, all the people who are screaming into the ether today about how upset they are that the Bills didn't make a move. How do you do better? Who is better right now in the NFL? Howie Roseman for right now. I wonder if some of these same things were being said about Mickey Loomis when the Saints were trading away assets and doing whatever they had to do in order to be regularly competitive. And then they have been decimated from a cap perspective ever since. You could maybe want him to be taking more of a Les Snead approach where
fuck them picks.
He sacrificed multiple years of draft classes, but still Chris found Jared Verse, still found Brandon Fisk, still put together a really good front seven and is still in competition. Now, is their Super Bowl window still open? Probably not.
The Rams?
But they're in it. They're in the hunt. After sacrificing everything year over year to go win a title, they did the thing. And they haven't been crucified long-term for it. It's not like they had to burn 10 years of their franchise to do it. And so that's where when you see these ultra-aggressive GMs who are winning titles behind that aggressive behavior, I think anybody who's sitting here going, well, I'd rather have the GM who stood pat and played it safe and extended our window versus, hey, I don't want to be Mickey Loomis. You don't have to be. There's no saying that you can't be aggressive and also not end up in cap hell for a decade. And so in that way, I think the fans who are frustrated have every right to do so. How do you feel personally?
I mean, I'm fine with it. I wouldn't expect Beane to have made a splash trade for anyone. I mean, you thought a trade was coming based on Tehran.
Maybe. Tehran? Really?
Yeah, remember when we restructured him less than 24 hours ago?
Yeah, there is that. So I guess you're right. There is a certain amount of like, hey, we got all excited. People are like, oh, here comes the move. Even though all day I've been snarkily tweeting that, hey, you know what the move is? It's that right there. That's the move. And I said that at 8 a.m. this morning. I brought it back around 11 a.m. And now it's funny in retrospect because it really was just fart noises.
I wonder if they had something lined up for maybe Shaheed because he ended up going to Seattle.
If I have one gripe, I'll say that it's very rich for the GM who's willing to, as the the eternal Buddy Nix would say, I was riverboat gambling when he traded up for TJ Graham. It's funny to watch a GM who's very comfortable riverboat gambling when he trades up in the second round for a player like Cody Ford or TJ Sanders. Like, oh, I got to have those 4th and 5th round picks. But then you won't give those same picks away for a proven NFL commodity. That bothers me. That bothers me because at its core, it points to like, there might be a problem with your ability to evaluate and prioritize. Chris, Keon Coleman in a trade. Do you know that if you traded away, this is when the Brian Thomas Jr. conversation came up, and they were like, oh, you obviously, or the Jalen Waddle conversation, which, talking to our friend Alfar Tiaga tonight, he doesn't believe any of that was real. When you see young players like that, if they ever become available, at worst, that player is already the type of talent that you're hoping the draft pick you're giving up might be. It's the Peter Griffin thing of, well, I'll take the mystery box. Well, why not take the speedboat? Well, because that box could be anything. It could even be a speedboat. That's what I feel like Brandon Beane does with these late round picks. And it's worth noting he has found talent for this football team throughout the course of that process. But as we talked about probably about 2 weeks ago now, Brett Coleman did an analysis of all of the recent Super Bowl winners for the last 15 years. And how many of their talents were homegrown talents. And what he's found is that we're right there as the Buffalo Bills in terms of how many homegrown and then retained talents the Buffalo Bills have on their roster. It's about 64% is where you need to be, because nobody buys their way to a Super Bowl. Free agency just doesn't allow for that because the cost is so prohibitive. You must have glaring weaknesses somewhere else in your roster. Look at the Bengals this year. They didn't go to free agency. They just massively overpaid 3 players and then said, well, we don't need an offensive line. What do we need linebackers for? Defensive backs? We don't need any of that. So you're seeing what happens to teams who think that way in the NFL. And I just look at this and I say, okay, it doesn't have to be that though, right? Like those late round picks have panned out. We've retained those guys, those day 2, day 3 guys. They've been great or good enough that they've gotten second contracts here. The problem is none of the guys that the Bills have built their core around are stars. That's the problem. We have a whole bunch of wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 talents, and we don't have any alpha wide receiver. And I know wide receiver 1 gets overblown, so I'm not even going to talk about it like that. I'm going to talk about star power. How much star power does this team have of the players we've drafted? Not serviceable, legitimate stars. Off the top of your head, who can you name?
Well, it's Allen and Cook. But I could confidently say the star power is less than it's been the last 5 years.
And that's because you stopped paying for it. And you were hoping that your draft classes would just pay you the dividends necessary to get that production. Now you're starting to see some glimpses of it. You know, one of the funniest tweets I saw all day today was this one here where they're talking about everybody eats, and you know Jake the Bills fan says Bills, our entire receiver room eats, and then there's Dalton Kincaid. It's just the jokes write themselves, guys. It's a fat dog. It's just a dog that's too fat and doesn't fit in the clothes. It's great, and that makes sense if you look at it through the context of what he's been doing in terms of a pass catcher. And I'd argue maybe some of this is the reason that you look at a GM like Brandon Beane and go, I don't know where you get the hubris to sit here and go, we're fine. Our roster's fine. Well, Tucker Kraft has been getting all the public love. The media's been all over him. Every sports writer everywhere is talking about how great Tucker Kraft is. Do you know that Dalton Kincaid has been outplaying him when he's been on the field in terms of passer rating when targeted and yards per target?
We don't continue to outplay him for the rest of the season. That's a fact.
That is a fact. I can't dispute that. So when you see that, I understand why they go, well, why do I need to make a trade? But still, I would rather see them make a move and go better this team and yeah, maybe you do sacrifice some of the future. To me, that's a symptom of an owner who doesn't put the necessary pressure and build a sense of urgency in his staff. And so because of that, you see a guy who is very confident looking at this roster and a coaching staff that's very confident looking at this roster and going, now we can make this work. I hope they're right. Because right now there's a lot of things that look like it's just being done. Like I look at our pass catchers, Chris, it really is just, they're going to get through this season with the power of friendship. Same thing in terms of pass rushers after the Michael Hoyt injury. It's just, hey, we're all going to band together and vibes is what we're going to survive on. Because it sure as hell isn't raw talent. It's not raw separation talent. It's not raw pass rush talent. What is this thing other than friendship and vibes that they're expecting these things to thrive on? But then also, I did make this statement. I was frustrated. I was coming out of a really contentious meeting this morning, and one of my coworkers stopped me in the office and said, hey, what do you think? Like, are the Bills going to make a trade? And I brought this dynamic up because there's a tweet here from Meerkat is his name on Twitter. It says Elijah Moore isn't letting up the stat sheet, but he's making the most out of his limited role. On just 11 total touches, Moore has gained 7 first downs and scored a touchdown while averaging 11.9 yards per touch, whether it's a jet sweep or a catch. Is it time to give Elijah Moore more action? The snarky thing that I said this morning was, even if you took a good wide receiver and put them on the roster, there's no guarantee they'd be utilized properly. There's no guarantee that they would get the right shine unless you were bringing in a legitimate guy who was so talented he couldn't be ignored. The Rashid Shaheed pick, okay, he can separate and he can run deep routes and he's fast. Well, we had that in Marvis Valdez-Scantling. And do you know how much we played him?
Nothing.
And then we cut him. And then he went to New Orleans and scored touchdowns and talked smack about how, oh, this is way better than being in Buffalo. Because at least they're letting me play. I think the identity of this team is so wrapped up in that tight end room and they finally see it that now they're scared to do anything outside of it. And I think that that's convinced them they don't need the wide receiver help. I think that's false. I also saw a tweet from Stevie Johnson today talking about, he was trying to talk about the idea of Deebo Samuel when everyone thought that was a possibility. And I sent that a screenshot of it to a bunch of my friends and said, this is why I can't listen to pro athletes talk about this stuff, because his tweet was something along the lines of Deebo Samuel would be perfect because he gives you another dynamic playmaker but doesn't take away from Keon Coleman's role. What role? What are we talking about? Keon Coleman's role is limited because of Keon Coleman. We're here having the wide receiver conversation because of Keon Coleman. I would die inside to know that Brandon Beane gave Keon Coleman's role on this roster and his development any sort of thought as to whether or not we make a trade here this week. Would you be frustrated if you knew that that played into their thing of, well, we got to let him develop and we got to see what happens? How mad would you be on a scale of 1 to 10 if you found out that played any sort of a role in this?
You sound like Darcy Regier in 0506. Wow, we got to let this play out. No, dude, we need a defenseman. We need a 7th defenseman. What if something happens? What if Jay McKee gets a staph infection in Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals?
Yeah, that was a dark day. And so when I think about how it's like, okay, so clearly we didn't make a trade. What do we have now? What are we looking at? And where can we move forward from here? Because again, this is just a quick hit just to get some of this off my chest. That doesn't mean the Bills are finished. It doesn't mean that Chris, if I go down the list here that Adam Schefter tweeted out of all of the 2025 trades that were made between October and November, if you look at it, who here really moves the needle for you? You personally, if you look at this list, we're talking about Sauce Gardner to Indy, A.D. Mitchell going back to the Jets as a part of that trade.
Probably Sauce Gardner.
You would have taken Sauce Gardner?
Well, that trade, is wild because Indianapolis is having a really good season. But then when you have to break it down, when it comes to play, you just have to break it down next level when it comes to like a playoff scenario and who the Colts are matched up. Because you go, oh, wow, the Colts are having a really good season. Colts and Broncos in the playoffs. Oh, that's going to be, break it down. You think Shane Steichen is going to outcoach Sean Payton? Not going to happen. It's just like when you had that one time where you were like, oh, man, Doug Marrone and Blake Bortles are going to take down Belichick and Brady. Like, you just have to break it down. Like, yeah, Colts are having a real good season. It's Daniel Jones and Shane Steichen. Who the fuck are they?
Also, one of the things I did note is that the Bills' wish list in terms of what they needed to get at the trade deadline, wide receiver, right? Wide receiver was the hot one at the forefront of this conversation.
I take a wide receiver over defensive line to kind of replace what Hoyt was doing.
Chris Olave just tweeting out, first of all, a congratulatory tweet for Rashid Shaheed getting traded away. And then after the trade deadline passed and he didn't get a phone call, he just tweeted out a frowny face.
Checks out.
I don't think it was for lack of trying. And this is where you have to take a look at what the trade market was as a whole. And this isn't a cope. This is me just pointing out facts. Joe Flacco. I'm gonna read off the offensive players, Chris, that were traded. Joe Flacco. Let's see. We have to go because here's all these defensive guys: Greg Newsome, Tyson Campbell, Kyle Duggar, Keon White, John Mechie, who hasn't been relevant since he scored a touchdown against Georgia in the SEC championship game, back in what 2021, I want to say. So Joe Flacco, John Mechie, defense, Jalen Phillips, Jacoby Myers, Rashid Shaheed, defense, A.D. Mitchell, and what the hell is a Trevor Penning?
Tackle.
Oh, okay.
Makes sense.
That makes sense. The Chargers are literally like, we'll do anything at this point.
They have no tackles.
Is awful. There weren't any wide receivers that got moved. Other than two guys who were bit players at best on their own team. And one of my favorites is the people who were mad about Jacoby Myers getting traded and the Bills not being in on it for multiple day three picks. But at the same time, have spent the last month and a half complaining about the separation metrics of Keon Coleman. Guess what? Jacoby Myers is the same player. It doesn't look like it. It doesn't seem like it. His hands are probably better. He's had a long career in the NFL. Keon Coleman's a rookie. Their separation numbers are eerily similar. Offensive trades just did not happen in this cycle. All the rumors around Deebo Samuel, Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle, none of it materialized because every team that has a talent like that, that's young, that's in their competitive window, that you could maybe sign to another contract or you have a 5th-year option on, you don't divest of that talent unless there's a real significant offer made. For the people who go, oh, well, I would have given a first for Olave. You think it's all it would have taken?
No, you probably would need to go middle round.
So you probably would have had to say first and a second?
No, maybe middle round, like first and a 4th.
I don't even think that gets it done. I mean, think about it. Sauce Gardner, who everybody knows, like, okay, and I'm getting a receiver back in return plus 2 first-round draft picks. Do you mean like these? Like, if you want a guy who has a name and has upshot, and this is a guy who hasn't signed another contract, so if the Saints don't have to take him, what happens when he becomes Tyler Show's best, most prolific weapon? Why would you give that away for a guy who you hope turns into Chris Olave? Where's the Saints' motivation to do that? So one thing is I want to sit here and continue banging on this team. I also understand it from the other side. This isn't Madden. You have to be able to make the move make sense. So unless you're willing to overpay, which if you were the Bills, you might have said, hey, I want to go to the Miami Dolphins and give them a first round and a second round for Jalen Waddle. Do you think they would trade him in the division?
No, that's like when the Jets were selling today, I'm hearing this happen at work on the radio, and I'm like, man, if only the Jets weren't in our division, we could make a call and get someone. Because they're not going to, that's like the only sport where you really don't trade in division is football.
So Diana Rossini had a tweet earlier today where she talked about the fact that the Jets had fielded calls from AFC East teams and declined them. So when you think about who that is, who might we have been kicking the tires on? Maybe
I don't know. I'm getting distracted by Greg Thompson.
Yeah, Greg Thompson's stupid hair.
No, from 2019.
Okay, so scroll up. There's Diana Rossini. Go up. It's Chuck Bass. Just making fun of Diana Rossini. Never mind. It's just this concept that it's not that phone calls didn't get made. I do think that that's real. I also think that you can lay some of this on the doorstep of an unmotivated staff that maybe has no urgency to meet the window, the competitive window that exists here. And if your boss isn't going to put pressure on you, why would you make your future life harder? Chris, why would you make decisions now if your boss isn't telling you have to, that you know for a fact will make your life harder later? If I come to you, Chris, in your current job and say, hey, Chris, I need 10,000 pieces cut, and I need it done whenever you get around to it, how fast are you going to work?
Not fast, considering the last couple weeks I've gotten jobs and they're like, this needs to go out today. Mm-hmm. Then why am I getting it now? Why couldn't I have gotten it 2 days ago? Because I'm currently cutting something that is 5,000 pieces. So no, I'm not doing it today. Sorry.
And it's that thing of they know what they're not dumb. They know what they've put on you as a burden. This is your job. I expect you to do this. But then every now and again, they'll come to you and say, hey, by the way, we also want this done. And that's the job of a leader, is to push the people who work under you, especially if you're not achieving what is your stated mission, which we started the show by saying that Terry Pagula's stated mission was, hey, we're going to win championships here in Buffalo. Well, you're not motivating anybody to do that, Terry. So for all the fans who are angry that the Bills didn't overpay, I don't know that there was people out there to overpay worth or what that price tag would have looked like. If you told me we gave up multiple first-round draft picks for Brian Thomas Jr., I would have been conflicted, but I would have taken it because it makes the product I'm about to watch easier to stomach, and it makes it seem like they have a pulse. It doesn't mean that it's the right move. It just means that it would have made me feel better. And then at the same time, you wonder, well, how come they're never, like, they're kicking the tires, but they're never seriously in on these things? Well, what's their motivation? Well, if Terry Pagula is never going to put pressure on Brandon Beane because he's just happy there's asses in seats, then Brandon Beane isn't going to go out there and rock the boat on his well-curated salary cap gymnastics and his future cap allocation. You know, he wants the right to be able to trade up for another Cody Ford if he's fit. And so in that way, we've landed in a position where the Bills, decimated by injury, but yet in a probably the most vulnerable position the AFC's ever been in, have decided that what they have on hand is good enough. The power of friendship's going to get them through this, Chris. It's just going to be coaching, because you know how great that's been. Friendship and vibes. For the love of God, this better work. That's all I can say. On behalf of me, every single member of Bills Mafia, and my liver, it better work. I'm Drew Gear. That's Chris Kruger. And these have been my trade deadline thoughts.